I still remember the day that I discovered my grandpa's secret. My mom told me to grab the mail for my grandpa. So I went downstairs, I grabbed it, I handed the envelope to her. She opened up the envelope, and inside was cash. A stack of bills that my grandpa didn't make from his job, but actually was getting from his tenants, that his tenants paid him every single month. At first, I was confused and surprised. I was like, wow, did grandpa just win a lot of prize money or something like this? And she was like, no, son, this is actually money that the tenants pay our grandpa. And so my mom went on to explain that this property that we were staying at had 5 other units. And each unit had a tenant staying in them that were paying my grandpa every month for the ability to stay in those units. My eyes grew wide open. As you can imagine, I was only 12. And I was like, whoa, so grandpa makes money without doing anything? Of course, my parents were helping manage the properties for my grandpa, so it wasn't like there was no work involved, but it was as close to true passive income that you can really get. And that one experience changed my life trajectory and was what really inspired me to get into real estate investing. So obviously, when I first got graduated as a pharmacist, I wanted to get into real estate investing as soon as possible. I went onto Yelp and I started looking for realtors nearby my alma mater college because I wanted to do what my friend did, which was he bought a house and then he rented out the other bedrooms to his college buddies. Not only was he living for free, but he was also making some cash flow on top of that to help pay for his schooling. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing, right? I went and found a realtor on Yelp, and together we looked at houses nearby the alma mater college, very close to the school. The very first house that I stepped foot in was a 100-year-old house. It was $262,000 sales price. And I was like, wow, this is super cheap. It's super close to the school. I'm going to go ahead and buy it. So that very first house that I saw, I put an offer on it right away and it was accepted. Later on did I realize what a big mistake I made. I was basically kind of blind going into it. I was a bit naive and I just wanted to get started right away. So I feel like maybe the seller took a little bit of advantage of that. What I found out later on was that this house had so many issues. Because it was an 100-year-old house, there were just so many things that were super old and needed to be replaced. In fact, it had no AC whatsoever. So the tenants would call me during the summer in the 105-degree summers in California and say, hey, dude, where's the AC? So I had to put in a mini split AC system. It's called a ductless AC system, and that cost me $15,000. Not only that, but I also got a call from the tenant saying that there's sewage that was spurting out of the kitchen sink and backing out of the shower drains. It was really gross, as you can imagine, and I had to replace the whole sewage line. Because when we stuck a camera down the pipe, it turned out the whole line was broken. So replacing that line cost me $9,000. And then I also had a rotting deck that I had to replace in the back, which cost me $2,600. So I had so many problems that happened on that very first house that I lost over $30,000 because I didn't really do my due diligence. I didn't pay attention to the home inspection reports and find these things out beforehand. And so if I were to restart and do this all over again, what I should have done was had a general contractor take a look at the inspection report, give me a quote for how much it would cost to replace all of the defective things at the house, and then I would send that to the seller and say, hey, this is how much it will cost for me to replace all these items or fix these items. Can you cover it, or can you cover part of it? And that way you can kind of negotiate with the seller and have a lot of the health and safety issues repaired and paid for by the seller. The other mistake that I made on that house was I put a for rent sign on the front lawn with my number on it. By the way, if you never do that, I would highly recommend against it, because what happened is I got a lot of calls from unqualified leads. I think I was getting a call every 30 minutes to 1 hour. And all of them were asking, can I move in without security deposit, without any income coming in? And it was a flat no to pretty much all of those leads. So I learned from that. I learned how to advertise in places where college students hang out so I can get my target tenant, which was college students. So I basically learned from my mistakes, and that property, I had 4 people living in it who are all UOP students, and they paid me about $2,500 a month, which was a lot more than what a typical rental made around that area. A typical rental would have made $1,200 to $1,500 per month, but I was making more like $2,500 per month, a bit over that actually, because I rented out by the bedroom. And so I realized that if I continued to rent out by the bedroom and expanding my rental portfolio, I could build up the cash flow up to a point where I would eventually replace my pharmacist salary. And so the next year I bought another property, and I basically bought one property per year using all of my savings from my pharmacist salary and all of the cash flow from my rentals. And I continued to add these bedrooms so I can get 5 or 6 people at the house. If I could get 6 people at the house and they each paid $700 a month, that would be about $4,200 a month in rental income, which is what allowed me to scale so rather quickly. Now, I wouldn't say it was an overnight thing. It took me about 5 years before I got to that point where I was a millionaire from investing in real estate. And then it eventually took me until age of 31 when I was able to retire and replace my pharmacist salary with the cash flow from my rentals. So it took me, a course of about 8 years to do that whole process. Now, one thing that kept me motivated is every single time I purchased a property, I would print out a picture of that property and I would post it on my bedroom wall. And I did this for every property that I bought, and it was kind of like Monopoly where I was collecting properties. I remember when I was a kid, we would count down the days until Christmas. And we basically used these chain links that looks kind of like this. And every single day that went by, we would break one chain until we get to the very end. That's when it was Christmas Day. And so that got us really excited for Christmas. Now, the reason why I use that analogy is because it was very similar for me in printing out these pictures of my houses. I was basically counting up how many houses I needed until I reached financial freedom or financial independence, defined by basically my expenses being completely covered by my cash flow from my rentals, plus having a good amount of income to travel the world and enjoy my life. Now, of course, that extra cash flow, that extra income really changed my life. I was able to travel a lot more. I went on more expensive vacations. I got to go to Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Belize, and I really got to splurge a little bit on some of the nicer hotels. So I treated my girlfriend to nice fine dining and nicer hotels, and I was able to also treat my parents. So whenever my parents would come over, which was about twice a month, I would treat them to dinner from the cash flow that I was making on the rentals. And then finally, I was able to cut down to 32 hours a week working as a pharmacist after about 3 years of investing in real estate. Now, my life was very enjoyable. I had a lot going on, but there was something missing from my life. I read this book. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it completely transformed my thinking around how the wealthy actually build up their wealth. You can say it basically opened up my eyes. It was a pathway to reaching financial freedom through real estate investing. I realized at that time that I didn't want to be working for my boss until I was 65 years old. Plus, my boss was pretty horrible. I remember one day I saw my colleague in the manager's office, and she was crying her eyes out, and she stormed out of the office. I later found out that my manager literally yelled at her for 45 minutes straight. All of the pharmacy witnessed it too. She later told me that she felt talked down to and humiliated. That's the cruelty of corporate America at its finest. Because there was all of this work drama, the best parts of my life at that time was when I took my lunch break and when I went to the bathroom. And I realized that's not a life I want to live forever. Something was off. And I never wanted to live my life with regret. I never wanted to, my biggest regret would have been if I was on my deathbed and I looked back at my life and I was like, wow, I didn't reach my full potential. I could have done so much more. I felt like I didn't give it my all. That would be the biggest regret in my life. So I realized that I had to go full force into real estate investing and build up my portfolio to a point where I reached financial independence. For me, it wasn't just a need, it was a must. And that's when I decided I eventually need to leave pharmacy. But of course, I needed to have an escape plan. So I learned that I should have a good amount of emergency funds saved up before I leave. So I saved up about $100,000. And what I did was I built up the rental portfolio to make enough cash flow to equal and exceed my pharmacist salary. That's the point when I was like, okay, I feel confident that I could quit. And so I basically quit in August of 2023 and was able to just do full-time real estate investing from there. So that's my story. I hope it inspires you like I was inspired by my grandpa. If you have any questions, please make sure to drop it in the comments down below and I'll go ahead and get back to you as soon as I can. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends so it can reach more people who are really struggling with getting started in real estate investing. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on next week's video.